Hello and welcome to What Now with Anna and Eric. I'm Anna,
I'm Eric.
and we were supposed to have a guest this week, but it did get bumped to next week. So for those of you that were like, all right, I don't usually listen to this podcast, but I will for Lindsay, stay here.
Gotcha. You're in.
There is no guest. You would do it. All right, next week she will be here though.
Yeah. Fake news. Fake news.
But we did get through another good chunk of Jesus's life, so that was exciting. We're still in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
We're still in it.
We're still. I keep thinking it's got to go pretty fast, right? Because it feels like we breeze through books of the Bible, but I keep forgetting, number one, they're all pretty long, and we're reading four at the same time. So
yeah, so it's gonna take a little bit. It chips away at it, but we are getting to the kind of the big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think we're getting closer, but I'm kind of excited for next week. There's a couple stories, and I might have looked ahead a little bit, but there's a couple pieces next week that I'm really excited about.
So there were a lot of different parts to this. Like there were parables, there were encounters, there were many different things that were happening. I was inspired to pull together some fun facts as it relates to mostly the Gospels. So basically,
Anna.
Yeah, woohoo! The new segment that will only be this week.
Bummer.
So just like some things that I was curious about as I was reading it. So like one of the things Jesus does is he asks a lot of questions. He often responds to questions with questions, or he'll ask questions in his parables, or he'll ask questions when somebody just inquires generally about something. He'll be like, oh, what do you think about that? And so I looked it up, and it's from my research.
Whoa.
It says that Jesus asks 307 questions throughout the Gospels. It's a lot. A lot of questions. And I did think this was interesting too, because something I read had talked about it. And it was basically talking about how Jesus asked a lot of questions, and he gave a lot of parables. He told a lot of stories. And both of these, both questions and parables, are used as techniques not to tell you the conclusion of something, but to get you to think yourself towards the conclusion that is being presented. So Jesus would often ask, like, somebody would be like, oh, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? He'd be like, well, what do you think it is? And he would often get people to make their own leaps of logic to get to the conclusion that he wanted them to get to. And something that we learned from all of our self-help books and studies about communication, because we're really big on studies and things, is that this is actually a very general technique that people teach in general. Hey, if you want somebody to realize something, get them to think it's their own idea. It's a legitimate step.
Truth. And I think it speaks a lot to it really speaks a lot to him wanting to get to know people. Like, I think it shows, hey, I'm going to ask you a question because I want to listen to you. It gets them into the discussion and prompts them to feel like, wow, I'm not just going to be preached at and told what to do. I'm actually cared about enough to have an opinion, even though it's a lot of guiding them to that opinion, but it is allowing them to develop that opinion and really own it rather than just being told it. So I like that.
Yeah, that's very cool. Another thing that I noticed as I was reading is how often it said the Pharisees then went and plotted Jesus's death. So I thought this seems to be happening quite often. I wonder exactly how many times this occurs and what it's related to, that sort of thing. And so I did end up did my own little research. Now, granted, some of these are technically repeats because there's 4 Gospels, but there are 8 different points where the Pharisees plot to kill Jesus. One time they plot to kill Lazarus because Jesus raised him from the dead and people were really excited about it. And then one time where Jesus just said to their face, I know you're trying to kill me. I'm like,
There has to be points where Jesus has to pull that card of, I know you do know I know everything that's going on, right?
But I know you're trying to kill me.
Well,
like trying to hide it at this point. Nah.
Well, that's what I think. Like you said, we talked about it multiple times of we like to humanize God and humanize Jesus. And I think just in this chunk for this week, and I don't know if it's because we did have in there when he goes into the temple that's they basically turned it into a market and he gets really upset. But then there's all of these parables and there's all these moments where for me when I'm reading this, it's almost like you get a little of frustration from Jesus. Like he's like, oh, I'm telling you all of these stories. Like it seemed like it was a lot of questions of like, come on, like, are we going to get this? And the frustration of you're using this for this way. It just seems like if I were to humanize Jesus a little bit, this is a lot of times where he seems like he could be showing a little frustration with grasping the concept. And it's getting close to the end, so he's getting closer of knowing what's to come.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a little urgency to it, like, hey, let's
he
start.
talks about it. He talks about it with people, like I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
So
like, I think that frustration could flow over into his ministry a little bit if he knows, like, hey, this is coming, so let's get a move on a little bit. Yeah. So, but yeah. Fun fact for me in this, because you're fun fact in it.
Oh yeah.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all mention that him coming into Jerusalem. And in Matthew, he rides in on a donkey. Mark and Luke, it's referred to as a colt, and then John actually just refers to the scripture that they're referring to, and it's a donkey's colt. So I think it's funny in the writing that Matthew chose to be like, no, it was a donkey, and then Mark and Luke are like, it is a colt. Like it just seems it was funny how they refer to it, and I wonder like that's an interesting take on it. For me is like how they chose to identify it in that way. I thought it was kind of funny. But
so kind of going off of that then about the different ways that the Gospels address something specific. So as I was reading through, I noticed there was this one line, and it was when people were questioning Jesus and he was questioning them back, basically. But at the end of several encounters, it said, and we can see it in Matthew 22:46, no one could answer him, and after that, no one dared to ask him any more questions. And so I noticed that 3 times, and I thought, wait a second. I feel like those happened after totally different incidences. And so I looked it up because I was curious. And so in Luke, the Sadducees ask about the resurrection, which is funny because they don't even believe in the resurrection. They're legitimately just trying to trick Jesus, like the more obvious of the plots. And so they ask about the resurrection. Jesus basically calls them out on it. And then it says, and no one dared to ask him any questions. And then in Matthew, the Pharisees, Jesus is asking the Pharisees about why do they think the Messiah is the son of David when David calls him my Lord? And then it says, after that, no one dared ask him any questions. And then in Mark, a guy comes up and asks Jesus what the greatest commandment is. Jesus answers, and then it says, and no one dared ask him any questions. So I'm like picturing in my mind, like all the apostles sitting together and like, remember that time where somebody asked Jesus something and then nobody even spoke after that? And then Luke's like, oh yeah, that was the resurrection question. And then Matthew's like, no, it was the other one. And then Mark's like, no, it was what he was talking about, the greatest commandment, you guys. Like, and I'm like picturing in my mind that this is how this went down. But something I did think was interesting, because I've been reading this book about the way that we see the Bible and then the cultural differences between Eastern writing and Western perspective. And something that they were talking about was the Eastern perspective of time versus our perspective of time. So like in the Bible, there's two words for time. There's chronos and there's kairo. And chronos is like chronological, like it happens linearly.
Like
And
how we're reading the Bible. Right
yeah, like literally how we're reading the Bible right now. And kairo refers to timing, like the verse in the Bible where it says there's a season for everything and there's a timing for everything. And so in this book, this guy was talking about his Eastern friends telling him a story, and they did not tell it to him chronologically. They basically told it to him like as facts were needed. They like threw them in basically. And so what he was talking about is biblically, some of the things that we see as like these basically they just botched the history of what was happening, was actually they are telling it from an Eastern mindset of as facts are needed, they're putting that in. And so it doesn't necessarily matter after which question people stopped questioning Jesus. It just matters that it happened. And so they put that in there. So I just thought that was very interesting.
It's culturally relevant. Is you have to know your culture that you're
Yeah, and it just adds such depth to the Bible. The deeper your understanding is. It's fun. It's very fun.
Well, that's what I say. You see how much fun you can get out of one book. Like we're thinking about how the conversations would go in those situations. We think about the language that's used and why that language is different than what we might think. It's funny. You keep bringing up the questions, and I made a note in here. I thought it was funny. It was Mark 10, and it was verse 35. It's when James and John ask Jesus a question, and the question to his, or no, it's not, it's a statement. It says, "Teacher," they say, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." And it's like, really? Like you went to Jesus and that's the statement you're going to make? And they go into, let one of us sit here, but to just lead with, "We want you to do whatever you want you to do for us, whatever we ask." That's a pretty bold statement to make to Jesus. And then they're like, "Hey, this is here's what we're asking for." It's like, really? That's you think you're that? And I mean, they did think they were that close to him that they were bold enough to ask, but man, that seems very.
And then there was another account where it said their mom went and asked.
Yeah. Well,
let's talk about my baby boys.
Yeah.
Okay, so couple verses besides fun fact that I singled out. One is John 12 verses 42 to 43. And it says, "Many people did believe in him," Jesus. However, including some of the Jewish leaders. But they wouldn't admit it for fear that the Pharisees would expel them from the synagogue, for they loved human praise more than the praise of God. Which I was like, ugh. It's a very strong statement to make about somebody. That's a bummer.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to that speaks deeper. Like I have it highlighted, and it speaks deeper to the fact that it's that knowing, like the praise of humans is something that is right there in your face, tangible. Like I am getting praise, so I need that. Where the praise of God, you might not notice it right away, or like you might not be able to physically touch it. It might just be something that's moving in your life. So how easy is it for us to, well, I'm getting recognized in a positive way for this, so this is more important than maybe doing the right thing and moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I think that speaks a lot of just culture in general and what we as humans kind of value in a lot of situations.
And we really do. Like, we are very much for the praise of man in so many different aspects of our life. We don't always call it that. Sometimes we call it like success or what is acceptable, which seems like much more appropriate reasons for doing things. You know, I'm doing this to be successful, or I'm doing this because it's culturally acceptable. Well, great. Is it God acceptable? Is it God successful? Because those can be very different things. And especially in our American culture, where being independent and being successful is such a big part of the American dream, we can often let that trump our spiritual walk with God.
Yeah.
And what he has for us.
For sure.
So it's pretty crazy. My second verse, this one's a big one, is when Jesus is telling the story about the king who has a vineyard, and at one point he sends some servants to go check up on it. They get beaten up by the guys who are in charge of the vineyard. Sends another person, they get beaten up, sends another person. And then it goes to Mark 12, verses 5 through 6, and it says this. The next servant he sent was killed. Others he sent were either beaten or killed until there was only one left, his son, whom he loved dearly. The owner finally sent him, thinking, surely they will respect my son. And this is a direct reference to God has been sending prophet after prophet after prophet to the people of Israel to get them on track, and they are beating them and they are killing them. And he says, surely they will respect my son. Spoiler alert.
Jesus talking Jesus. I'm just
For real. Mind blown. This is a very big moment. But I don't know, like, it's almost, you know, like we tell stories, or I've heard a lot of pastors tell stories metaphorically, like trying to talk about, hey, Jesus's death was a very big deal. So let me tell this story so you can kind of get a better perspective of it. This is a very powerful story Jesus tells about himself.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like you feel it, like these people in the vineyard, they're the worst people. But
yeah.
having said that,
and I just think it speaks in so many levels. I mean, yeah, you talk about how horrible they are, but still, he didn't say, well, let them do whatever. I'm not going to send my son to go deal with it. No, he still sent his son. There's still the outcome. And it's like, yeah, to be able to just, once again, Jesus talking about Jesus to people. It's like, and the questions of, it just makes sense. A lot of the questions is, like, a lot of questions, well, who is the Messiah, or who do people say I am? Like, it's a lot of them. He wants them to really believe and speak into who he is, instead of him just telling them and saying, believe it because I told you so.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, I'm telling you.
Did you have verses?
I tell you, so hang on, it's Matthew 20. Where is it? Hang on. This is computing. Where is it? 20 through 30. So it's basically the workers in the vineyard, where he kept sending them out at different times of the day and then pays them all the same amount.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's but this is the one that I just get so wrapped up in, because this was the real life talk of a friend of mine and I, when we talk about it, and his basis, a lot of the basis for his, I don't want to believe in this, I'm not going to believe in this, is because of the concept of this is open to everyone. Like, this is anybody who,
like, even the worst people.
Yeah, like even a person that does all the good in the world and a person who steals and kills, they can both just accept Jesus and get into heaven. Like that concept of it. And this is Jesus speaking about, listen, yeah, these people put in this work. These people only put in this work. They all get the same. It's all available to everybody. And this is the promise. So it's not, there's no qualifiers into that promise. You agreed upon this. Like it's just, it always strikes me that it's a tough, when it's laid out this way, it's a tough concept for even me to look at. Be like, man, maybe you should have negotiated your contract a little bit better if you were starting early. But yeah, just that whole talk about, no, this is what we hired you for. You did the job. Don't worry about other people. Don't worry about the other situation. Worry about yourself and taking care of what you're supposed to be taking care of. And quit trying to judge other people or talk about other people or worry what the other person has for whatever they have it for. Where are you at and what are you doing? And that's really, like I said, but when you put it in this context of, no, the first will be the last, so the last will be first and the first will be last. We get into, because once again, looking a little bit ahead, we get into that really Jesus showing himself as a servant leader. And I think in next week, that's really going to come out in a lot of the passages. So I think this is kind of setting the table for that.
Setting the table, would you say like the Last Supper table?
Like a final supper?
Like an actual table with food on it?
But yeah, so that's what I had.
You know what I was thinking too? Because we said Last Supper, so of course my mind immediately went to Judas. And like, whoever dips their bread in the cup, they will betray me. And everybody's like, what? Who is it? But go with me on this. So like the part where I was thinking, oh, the apostles were probably all talking about like, no, everybody stopped answering him questions after this moment or whatever. And in my mind, I'm like picturing Judas in the background, like, no, you guys, remember that time where that woman used that really expensive perfume? Jesus definitely said she should not have done that. And then people started answering questions, like just making up some random untrue answer to something.
Judas is just a pot stirrer. He's
a pot. And you know what? I cannot imagine, like, I'm just trying to picture him. I try to picture him, like, the dynamic of having Judas in the group. Because there's even some moments where, like, during the perfume, Judas was like, oh, you should have told her not to use it. And it's like, secretly, he just wanted to steal all the money.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that had to have come out somehow. Like, how was no one suspicious? How was no one suspicious of him? I'm telling you.
And once again, it speaks to Jesus and allowing
whoever the chance. Even Judas had a chance. He was going down a dark road pretty solidly.
Well, that gets into a whole other
conversation.
Yeah.
But so next step, Eric.
Oh, I'm gonna full disclosure.
I'll go first. Do you want me to go first?
Well, yeah, because I don't have a next step, so I'm just excited for yours.
You didn't have to say that. I would have given you time.
Listen, here's me just being open and honest and just saying, you know what? I did not come with a next step.
Okay, so mine is related to the John 12:42-43, for they loved human praise more than the praise of God. And so my next step would be to ask yourself, do you love human praise more than the praise of God? What does that look like in your life?
Oh, see, sometimes you just don't need a next step because you crushed it. And this is one of those times.
It was kind of a short one too. I didn't give you much time to come up with anything. Sorry.
You don't need a second next step when that's the next step is really what is more important. What do you value more? Because you should get in theory, if you are living for the praise of God, you're gonna get human praise from the right people that.
Yeah, from the right people being the key word here.
Yeah, because there might be a lot of wrong people in your life giving you praise for some wrong things. Just saying. That has been known to happen.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the prophets, I think maybe 3 people like them. But they were the right people.
The right people did.
They were the right people.
And you might get lucky and get a drive-by cloaking, because that happened when you
That's true. Look forward to that in your life, a drive-by cloaking.
Anna might be coming to a town near you with a drive-by cloaking.
I just would love to do that, to throw jackets on people. You can do it to people who need jackets, then it's even holy at the same time, so it's perfect.
Look at that.
So next week we will have a guest.
You know what? We'll just keep saying it. We'll just keep saying it
until somebody shows up and they're like, all right, well, that. Okay, but really, next week, Lindsay will be on the podcast.
There we go.
So, look forward to that.
The question is, do you have a Halloween costume ready to go for this weekend or what?
I mean, I always have a costume on hand just for life,
So what's your go-to Halloween costume for this weekend then?
It would include a sword, of course, a cape, some really sweet boots, various other elements.
Well, there you go.
And I'm not actually going to go trick-or-treating. I'm just going to wear it in my house just for the joy of the moment.
Anna, I would be more confused if you said you were going to go trick-or-treating. Like that.
Oh, yeah. Because I'm an adult? Is that what you're thinking? Yeah. Hey,
you've aged out. You've aged out.
Generous people in the world. I'm sure somebody would have mercy.
You've aged out of the system when it comes to trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
I'd say that with all the love possible, but
thank you. Well, if it makes you feel better, I haven't done it in like 15 years anyways. So.
I haven't done it like 2 years. I'm good.
2, maybe 3, 2.5. 2.5.
Do you pass out candy at your house?
No one really comes down our street.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow,
Not we eat the candy. It's basically like any other day. Well, unless I decide to dress up.
Which you should, because it's just fun.
For fun. It is fun.
Oh man. All right. I think we've hit it. I think we've hit all the marks. We talked about Halloween.
Right, good. We vamped a little bit. We're good. All right. So next week, we're going to talk about Last Supper. Is next week the week?
I didn't look that far. Let's give me understand me a little bit. I didn't look that far ahead.
Okay. We're getting closer.
Yeah.
Whether or not next week is the week, I could not tell you, but we're getting closer. So look forward to next week and our guests, and of course talking more about Jesus, who is our favorite person in the world and the universe and everything.
And everything.
And everything. So have a great week.
Have a great week. Happy Halloween. Dress up. Have fun.
That's right.
See ya.